In the heart of a dusty village where children played barefoot and women carried stories in their eyes, lived Amina, a girl with calloused hands, an untamed spirit, and a silence that spoke louder than most. At 19, she was already weathered by life. Her father had passed during the last harvest, leaving her and her mother to survive on threadbare prayers and the mercy of odd jobs. Still, Amina never begged, never bent. She stitched clothes, carried water, and sold herbs in the marketplace with her chin held high. People spoke of her beauty like a myth, skin kissed by the sun, hair like coiled silk, and eyes that seemed to carry secrets. But it was her stillness that unnerved people most. As if she always knew more than she let on. One morning, as she arranged lemongrass bundles on her mat in the square, a hush fell over the crowd. A black car, the kind no one had seen this deep into the village, rolled down the dirt path, kicking up the past with every turn. When it stopped in front of Amina, people held their breath. Out stepped Mr. Harold. He was known by name more than presence. A wealthy, aging man who had inherited his father's coffee plantations after years of silence abroad. No one knew much about him, only that he lived in a grand house at the edge of the forest, where the gates never opened and lights flickered on without reason. Children whispered he'd lost a wife. Adults whispered worse. And now he stood before Amina with a briefcase and a proposal. "I'd like to speak with your mother," he said, voice deep and even. Within an hour, he was seated cross-legged on the floor of their mud-brick home, beside a broken fan and a framed photo of Amina's late father. No servant. No guards. Just Harold and a quietness that wrapped itself around every word he spoke. "I want to marry your daughter," he said plainly. Her mother nearly dropped the tea. "She's a child." "She's a woman," Harold replied. "And I can give her a future." Amina said nothing. Not then. Not for days. The village erupted with talk. Some called it scandal. Others called it salvation. A girl born into dust, now destined for silk. But no one understood Amina's eyes when she finally nodded yes. They didn't gleam with hope or vanity. They gleamed with purpose. No one asked why she agreed. And Amina never told them that this wasn't the first time she'd seen Mr. Harold. Not even her mother knew. Because sometimes, fate doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes, it returns quietly in a black car, asking for your hand, offering a future, but hiding a past. The day of the wedding arrived beneath a sky smeared with honeyed light. The village, usually indifferent to ceremony, buzzed like an open hive. Children clung to fences. Elderly women wrapped themselves in faded shawls and gossiped beneath the neem trees. Everyone had a theory about why a man nearly 3 times Amina's age had chosen her. Everyone, it seemed, except Amina. She sat in front of a cracked mirror inside Harold's estate, transformed into a reluctant bride. The dress he'd chosen for her shimmered like pearl water under candlelight, but she looked at it like it didn't belong to her. Servants scurried in and out with pins and perfume, but Amina barely moved. "You are lucky," one whispered, placing bangles on her wrists, "to marry a man with a house like this." Amina didn't respond. Her gaze was locked on the photograph resting at the vanity's corner, an old, faded picture of a woman she didn't recognize. The woman wore the same expression Amina saw in her own reflection, composed, yet unspeakably hollow. Outside, the ceremony unfolded like something from a dream stitched together with too much thread. Silk-draped tables, musicians playing a song that had no roots in the village, guests in gold, their laughter sharp like broken glass. And at the center stood Harold, tall and severe in a white sherwani, his hands shaking ever so slightly. When Amina finally appeared, the murmurs swelled like a tide. She walked slowly, deliberately, every step echoing more than just nerves. The crowd saw beauty. Harold saw resolve. Only one person saw the truth, Amina's mother, whose eyes brimmed with pride and confusion all at once. The ceremony was brief, as Harold had requested. No unnecessary rituals. Just the vows, the signatures, and a kiss that barely brushed her forehead. But that night, when the guests had gone and the chandeliers cast long shadows across the marble floor, Amina found herself alone in the room that was now hers. The walls were covered in old paintings, muted landscapes, and a lingering scent of sandalwood. On the table beside the bed sat a locked drawer, unremarkable at first glance. But something about it tugged at her instincts. She found the key tucked inside the drawer of his desk. She turned it slowly, hands trembling, breath shallow. Inside was a single black and white photograph. It was her mother, young, terrified, standing beside Harold outside a building she didn't recognize. Amina's heart dropped. She sank to the floor, clutching the photo like it had burned her. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't fate. This was history repeating itself. And suddenly, Amina understood. This marriage wasn't the beginning of a new life. It was the unearthing of a buried one. The photo didn't lie. There was no mistaking the delicate curve of her mother's jawline, the frightened poise in her eyes. Amina had studied that face for years, but she had never seen it captured in such stillness, beside a man who now wore the title husband. That night, Harold entered the room quietly, as though wary of disturbing something fragile. He glanced at Amina sitting at the edge of the bed, the photo trembling in her lap. "I see you found it," he said, voice low and strained. "Why was it hidden?" she asked, without looking up. There was a long pause. Then a sigh, a deep, aged sound of a man surrendering to time. "Because I didn't want it to follow me into this life. Into us." Amina stood slowly, placing the photo between them like a line that could no longer be crossed. "You knew who I was before you proposed, didn't you?" Harold nodded. "From the moment I saw you helping the injured boy outside the clinic last year. You looked just like her." "My mother never spoke of you," Amina said. "Only that a powerful man once destroyed her chances at a future. Left her alone. Pregnant. Shamed." "I was young," Harold whispered. "Arrogant. And terrified." "And rich," Amina added sharply. "Which meant you could disappear without consequence." He winced at her words but didn't deny them. "I didn't come back to hurt you. I came to make something right." Amina turned toward the window. Outside, the estate's garden glistened with moonlight, orderly, silent, beautiful in a way that felt utterly false. "You thought marrying me would fix the past?" "No," Harold said. "But I thought maybe, if I gave you the life I stole from your mother, if I gave you a choice." She spun around. "You never gave her a choice." Silence again. Heavy. Absolute. He took a step forward, then stopped. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I only hoped to offer something more than silence." Amina studied him. Not the man in fine silk or expensive cologne, but the man whose guilt had aged him more than time ever could. He was no longer a shadow from her mother's stories. He was real. Flawed. And still, in some twisted way, trying. "I didn't marry you for love," she said quietly. "I married you to understand." Harold's eyes softened. "And now?" "I understand," she whispered. "But I haven't decided what that means yet." She left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall like drumbeats of defiance. Behind her, Harold remained still, facing the ghost of a mistake that had finally spoken back. Downstairs, Amina sat alone, the photo now folded into her palm. Her pulse slowed. Her mind raced. She had unearthed the truth. But now she had to decide what to do with it. Days passed like drifting smoke, soft, shapeless, and silent. Amina moved through the grand house like a ghost learning how to haunt her own story. She spoke little to Harold, yet watched him from a distance. He no longer lingered in his study or walked the garden with indifference. He spent hours alone in the village square, speaking to elders, helping at the clinic, and most surprisingly, listening. People noticed. Whispers shifted from scandal to speculation. Some claimed guilt was eating at him. Others believed Amina had bewitched the old man. But no one knew the truth. Redemption had begun in the quiet moments, not the grand ones. One afternoon, Amina followed Harold to the hill behind the estate. She found him kneeling by a patch of earth marked by a simple wooden cross. "She was buried here," he said without turning. "I didn't even attend her funeral. I didn't deserve to." Amina said nothing. Instead, she knelt beside him and placed the photograph on the soil. Her mother's image returned to rest. "She forgave you," Amina murmured. "Not with words. But in the life she gave me." Harold's shoulders trembled, the weight of decades finally settling. And you? Can you? I'm not sure yet, she admitted. But I can choose how the story continues. And so, she did. In the weeks that followed, the village began to change. Harold donated large sections of his land to local farmers, built a scholarship in Amina's mother's name, and funded a women's education center in the heart of the village. But none of it came with speeches or cameras. Only quiet gestures and sincere efforts. As for Amina, she didn't play the role of a pampered wife. She taught reading classes in the community center, rewrote old folktales with new endings, and walked through the market without guards or gold. Their relationship was no fairy tale. It was strange, scarred, and layered with things no one could fully name. There were still nights they didn't speak, and mornings filled with silence. But slowly, respect began to root itself between them, fragile at first, then steady. Not built on love, but on truth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Amina sat on the veranda, writing in a worn journal. Harold approached, 2 cups of chai in hand. I can't change the past, he said, placing one beside her. No, Amina agreed, looking up at him. But we don't have to live inside it either. She sipped, then smiled faintly, not for him, but for herself. For the girl who had walked into a stranger's house with fire in her heart and found, somewhere between grief and grace, a new kind of freedom. I didn't marry him for love, she would later write. But I stayed, because love found us both in the truth.